You see, although I no longer cared about anything, yet I still felt pain, for instance. If someone had struck me, I would have felt pain. Exactly the same thing applied in the moral sense. If something very pitiful happened, I felt pity, just as I had felt it before I'd become completely indifferent to life. I had felt pity a few moments back. I would certainly have helped a child. Why had I not helped this little girl then? It was because a thought had occurred to me. When she pulled at my sleeve and begged me to come, a problem suddenly confronted me and I couldn't resolve it. The problem was an idle one, but it angered me. I was angered by the consequent deduction that if I had already made up my mind to make an end that night, then I should have become more than ever indifferent to everything which went on in the world. Why, then, did I suddenly feel that I was not indifferent, and that I pitied the little girl? I remember that I was very sorry for her, even to the extent of experiencing a strange, and in my position, even an improbable pain. But I don't know how to explain the transient sensation I experienced then any better. Only the sensation continued when I reached home and sat down, and I felt more irritable than I had done for a very long time. Discussion after discussion flowed through my mind. It was obvious that if I was a man and not a zero, then until I became a zero, I was alive and therefore could suffer, be angry, and feel ashamed of my actions. True, but if I was going to kill myself, say in 2 hours' time, then what was this little girl to me, and what business had I to think of shame or anything else in the world? I'd become a zero, an absolute zero. And surely the knowledge that I would now cease entirely to exist, so that nothing would exist, could not fail to influence however little my feeling of pity for the girl or my feeling of shame at the base thing I had just done. Why, that was my reason for stamping at the poor child and shouting at her wildly, to show that not only did I feel no pity, but also that if I was doing something inhumanly base, then it was permissible because in 2 hours' time everything would fade. Can you believe that was why I shouted at her? I am almost certain of it now. I felt clearly that life and the whole world depended on me. You can even put it this way. The world was then made for me alone. Once I had shot myself, the world would cease to exist, for me at least. Not to mention the possibility that perhaps nothing would be left to anyone after I died, and as soon as my consciousness had faded, the whole world would fade as a ghost, as the property of my brain alone, and would become null and void since, perhaps, I myself am the whole world and am all these people. I remember that as I sat there discussing these things with myself, I turned all these new problems, which crowded forward one after the other, in quite a different direction and invented something fresh. For instance, I suddenly had this strange idea. If I had formerly lived in the moon or on Mars, and had there done the most shameful and dishonest action one can imagine, and had been held up to scorn and ignominy there in a way one can only sometimes experience in dreams, in nightmares, and if afterwards I found myself on Earth and continued to retain cognizance of what I had done on another planet, and yet I knew I could never possibly return there, then gazing up at the moon from the Earth, would I feel indifferent or not? Would I feel that action shameful or not? These problems were idle and pointless, as the revolver was already lying in front of me, and my whole being felt that that would happen for certain. But they angered me, and I raged inside. It was as if I could not die, now that I had not solved a preliminary question. In a word, this little girl saved me because I put off the shot on account of these problems. Meanwhile, things had quieted down at the captain's, too. They had stopped playing cards and were settling down to sleep, with a few final grumbles and lazy curses. And it was at this point that I suddenly fell asleep, a thing which had never before happened to me while sitting in the armchair by the table. I fell asleep without noticing it at all myself. Dreams, as everyone knows, are strange phenomena. Some things present themselves with a terrifying clarity, with details as minute as those in a jeweler's watch, and one leaps over other details without even noticing, over space and time, for instance. It seems that dreams spring from the desires and not from the intellect, from the heart and not the head. And yet to what heights of cunning my intellect sometimes attained in my dreams. And incidentally, the most unintelligible things happen to my intellect in dreams. For instance, my brother died 5 years ago. Sometimes I dream of him. He takes part in my affairs, we are absorbed in what we are doing. And yet throughout the dream I know and remember that my brother is dead and buried. How is it, then, that I don't wonder why my brother, though dead, is still at my side, busying himself with my concerns? But enough of this. I entered my dream. Yes, it was then I dreamed my dream of November 3rd. They all taunt me now that it was after all only a dream. But surely it makes no difference whether it was a dream or not if this dream of mine showed me truth. Surely once you recognize truth and see it, you know it is the truth and that no other exists or can exist, whether you sleep or live. Well, dream it was, and that doesn't matter. But I had intended to extinguish this life which you so extol by suicide. Well, my dream revealed to me a new, a lofty, reinvigorated, and powerful life. Listen,